Welcome back to By the Common Man TV. I'm your host, Ardell Jackson, and today I want to share a lesson that has shaped my entire life. This isn't just another motivational speech. This is personal to me, and I want to share it with everybody. It's also the foundation of one of my books that I wrote by Building Self-Confidence by the Common Man. When most people think about confidence, they picture the loudest person in the room. I mean, you guys all know what I'm talking about. You know who that is, the loudest person in the room. The person who's always talking, the person who's demanding all the attention, the one everyone, notices. But over the years, I've learned something different about confidence. And I realized that real confidence isn't loud. Real confidence is solid. You can feel it. Somebody walks into the room, you can feel their presence. It doesn't have to be announced, and it doesn't have to announce itself. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't need to prove anything. Confidence simply knows who it is. We've been around that. You've been in a room, and then this one person, or somebody walks in the room, and they're like, wow, you can feel the presence, you can feel the aura, because they just exude with confidence in themselves, and so you can feel it. So it doesn't need to be announced. Confidence really simply does know who it is. I didn't grow up believing confidence came from standing on stage, being the center of attention. I grew up watching confidence. I watch every single day. I had examples. There are great examples of confidence. See, I was raised by my grandparents, and so we were raised down in the heart of Southern Maryland. My grandfather and my grandmother were tobacco farmers. They raised a lot of their crops, did all their other things. So, life was beautiful, but life was tough. Life was hard. We didn't have a lot of money. We weren't surrounded by all the luxury, but somehow we had everything we needed each and every day. When I say that, we had everything we needed each and every day. And it was just amazing. There was food on the table. There was structure. There was discipline. You know, Most importantly, there was a lot of love, and you could feel that love. My grandmother would wake up in the morning. You can smell the love too. She would wake up in the morning. You would wake up in the morning to freshly made biscuits, and fried potatoes and all that other good stuff, because she loved my grandfather. She loved us dearly, and so she wanted to make sure we had everything we needed. My grandfather was a hardworking man, so she made sure that he had everything he needed by going out there and just making sure that he was had the nourishment. Breakfast was on the table. There was no, that's not my role or any of that stuff. It was just she did it out of love. She did it out of love for all of us. Yeah, my grandfather wasn't the kind of man that gave us long speeches about how to become successful and all that other stuff. He just simply lived it. He just simply lived success. He knew what his success was. He knew what his purpose was, and he lived it. And you could see it on him. He was a happy man. He was a loving man. He showed me what responsibility looked like. He showed me what integrity looked like. He showed me what consistency looked like. When he walked into a room, man, when he walked into a room, he didn't demand the attention, but you knew he was there. People noticed him anyway because of his presence. He just walked with confidence. You could feel it. There was an aura around him. I used to always, when I think back on him, I think back and I look at it and you picture him in my mind. I just see, what I'm saying, his face, and I just see the sun rays just shining over him, man. It was an aura around him. He was truly my mentor. He was truly my everything. He taught me how to become the man I was today. And he taught me how to be a confident man. That became my first lessons in confidence. You see, confidence isn't built by people consistently telling you how great you are. Confidence is built by doing difficult things, by keeping your word, by showing up when no one is watching. You have those people who show up when it's 1,000 people out there, something's happening. They're the first person to show up, and they're the loudest person because they want everybody to feel like, hey, they're doing something for everyone. That's just, is that really confidence, or is that just putting on a front? And you tell me. Leave me a comment, and let me know what you believe that is. But it's the ones who do things and show up for people when no one else is watching. By learning from your failures instead of running from them. That's confidence in itself. Because it's crazy how easily we can run from our failures and not hold ourselves accountable. Is crazy, but we got to start holding ourselves accountable. And as you hold yourself accountable, then you build more confidence in yourself. You believe in yourself more. As a kid, man, I remember being teased because of where I lived. I lived on a farm, man, tobacco farm. We didn't have it all. We had to walk all the way up. It felt like I was walking for days just to get to the house. And, I didn't have all the luxuries that other kids had. My mother provided well for I dressed well, but, when kids look at where you live compared to where they live, because a lot of the kids I went to school with were middle class kids, they lived in the nice new neighborhoods, those types of things. So they would say mean things to you. But because I had a role model like my grandfather and my grandmother, they taught me that those are just their opinions. I knew who I was. They established purpose in me as a young age, and that carried me even when I had those gaps in life as I got older. Still, I was able to go back to that foundation. Like many young people, there are moments when I even questioned myself when I was going through that little stage of being teased and things like that. Moments when I wondered if I even measured up to these other kids. But like I said, I had role models that taught me what confidence looked like. And then every time I came home, my foundation was waiting for me, which was my grandparents. And my grandparents reminded me, not always with words, but they reminded me with examples, that my value wasn't determined by other people's opinions. And that's what really stuck with me to this day. And I still carry that lesson with me to this day. It's crazy. Here's something I want everybody listening to understand. And thank you all. Thank you everybody for subscribing, man, and being a part of this journey. I really appreciate it. Like I said, by the common man, it's not a brand, it's a movement. And, if I could touch one person today, with my story and help them kind of move forward in their life, then, I feel like I'm doing something and I'm providing something with this. So thank all of you guys for coming along with the journey. But like I was saying, with confidence, I still carry those things with me to this day. Here's something I want everybody listening, like I said, to understand. I want everybody to listen to this. Confidence doesn't start in the mirror. It doesn't start in the mirror. Confidence starts in the foundation. Confidence truly starts in the foundation. It starts with the promises you keep to yourself. That's number one. It starts with discipline. It starts with character. It starts with knowing your worth and knowing that your worth isn't determined by the likes, the followers, or the applause that you're given. The world will tell you confidence comes from success. That's something the world is always going to tell you, that confidence truly comes from success. I believe success is often the result of confidence, not the other way around. Here's the beautiful part about it, right? Even if you didn't grow up with the foundation I had, You still can build one. You truly can. You still can build one. Maybe you didn't have grandparents who encouraged you. Maybe you didn't have parents who showed you unconditional love. Maybe you spent years doubting yourself. That doesn't mean your story is over. It doesn't. It simply means today is the day you start building again, brick by brick, possession by possession, right? Habit by habit. Confidence isn't something you're born with. And I've said this to you guys. It's definitely not something that you're born with. It's something you build. Every time you choose discipline over excuses, you're building confidence. Every time you keep your word to someone, you're building confidence. Every time you get back up after you failed, you're building confidence. Every time you refuse to compare yourself, right, to someone else, you're building confidence. Confidence isn't perfection. Confidence isn't consistency. It's becoming so grounded in who you are that opinions of the world or and others no longer shake your foundation. No longer shake your foundation. So today I want to leave you guys with this. Stop trying to become the loudest person in the room. Become the most dependable. Become the most disciplined. Become the person whose action speaks louder than the words. Because real confidence doesn't have to tell people who it is. People see it, people feel it, people trust it. That's the kind of confidence I want to build. Is that the kind of confidence you want to build? Thank you guys for spending time with me today. If this message resonates with any of you, I hope to hear from you guys in the comments and let me know what helped build your confidence. Was it your parents? Was it your grandparents? Was it a coach? Was it a teacher? Was it a friend? Or did you have to build it on your own? Let me know. Let's encourage one another by sharing our stories, uplifting one another. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to By the Common Man TV, and man, share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. Until next time, I'm your host, Ardell Jackson. And remember, confidence isn't loud, confidence is solid. Keep building your foundation, folks, one day at a time. This is By the Common Man TV, where ordinary people discover strength to live extraordinary lives. By the Common Man. I'm out. Peace.